18th work session. Pam, you didn't have anything else to add?
No, sir.
Nothing else, Mr. Horn? You're muted, but I'm assuming no.
No, sir, I'm good.
Okay, then I will give the floor to Councilmember Bunker.
Thank you. What I'm about to talk about is not about faith or beliefs. This is not about individual Scientologists who are good, smart, dedicated people who really believe they're saving the planet. This is about the actions of an organization and the leadership of the organization, which has had a negative impact on the downtown for 45 years now. And I hope we can have a frank and open discussion without rancor. I'm not trying to stir up trouble. I'm trying to speak about the elephant in the room, which normally only gets discussed in whispers. There has been fear generated by Scientology. I mean, there's a reason why Time magazine called their cover stories the cult of greed and power. They got sued by Scientology for that. And for 10 years, Time fought that in court before they won. But during that period, all other publications and TV networks were frightened about taking on Scientology, and everyone was. I mean, they brought the IRS to its knees in 1993. After 2 years of a propaganda war and investigations of individual IRS agents, suddenly thousands of members all hit the IRS with individual lawsuits in what certainly seemed like a organized campaign. And the IRS caved, and David Miscavige proudly announced at a huge meeting, the war is over and Scientology has won. Well, I don't think the IRS even knew they were in a war. I think they were just doing their job, but there's a war going on here in Clearwater as well, and we should realize that. If we're not aware of that, or if we choose to ignore it, that doesn't mean that it's not happening. It goes back to 1975 when Scientology snuck into Clearwater with the goal to turn this into the first Scientology city. They rolled out a set of covert operations for the complete takeover of Clearwater. They used LLCs and other front groups and large amounts of cash to purchase the Fort Harrison Hotel and the Bank of Clearwater building. And it took a few weeks before we realized that the Southern Land Corporation and United Churches of Florida, rather, were actually Scientology, and the people were kind of upset here. So they, in 1977, a raid of Scientology's headquarters in Washington, D.C. and L.A. uncovered tens of thousands of documents detailing all these covert operations against the city, against former Mayor Gabe Casares and others, and federal agencies like the FBI and the IRS, and 10 top officials of Scientology, including L. Ron Hubbard's wife, Mary Sue, went to prison for this. L. Ron Hubbard himself was not around when the raid happened, and he spent the rest of his life in the desert hiding. I bring this up just as a basic reference point for some folks who may not be familiar with this history. Some people will say, well, that's ancient history. And some people will say, like Scientology will say, well, we've changed. But they really haven't. Half of those who were sent to prison, for example, in that are back in good graces inside Scientology. But the dirty work now is done by PIs hired by outside attorneys. And it hasn't really changed at all. In 2000, when I first moved here and worked at the Lisa McPherson Trust, trying to help people who were abused or defrauded by Scientology, I got to watch up close as Scientology led a global campaign to take down Bob Minton. Scientology was ruthless and relentless. It was like having the Terminator after you. The most devastating attack was a covert operation they ran to convince people that Bob had stolen $5 billion from the Nigerian government. He was a reverse Nigerian prince. It wasn't true, but Scientology hired a PI named David Lee, who spearheaded this operation, and they hired a beloved Nigerian soccer player named John Fashanu to become the front man for a report written by Scientology. The Fashanu report was ultimately used to freeze all of Bob's assets and get Bob to surrender. And I watched the toll that it took at him. I remember going into work every day and wondering, is this the day that Bob would have killed himself? And the man who, Bob actually died of a heart attack a few years ago, but he didn't live long enough to see John Fashanu admit to the press in 2009 that the whole Fashanu report was a scam and that he apologized for his role in it. The man who oversaw the entire covert operation was Mike Rinder, who led the Office of Special Affairs. And he's since left Scientology and is partnering with Leah Remini to help those who've been abused or defrauded. And we're now friends because the problem wasn't Mike Rinder. It was the leadership of the organization still pushing the most important policy in Scientology: keep Scientology working. The ends justify the means. And good people like Mike can be convinced that the most important thing to do is to protect Scientology. And you can find yourself doing some horrible things as a result. And that's not everyone. I mean, most members of Scientology aren't even aware of all this nasty stuff that's gone on. And if you told them, they don't believe it. But all of this has set a tone where people here in Clearwater are frightened of Scientology, or they just don't want to come downtown and put any money in Scientology's pockets. And we've got to be able to confront that. Last week, to show the impact that Scientology has on some people here, last week people were upset just because this little pamphlet about keeping yourself safe during the pandemic was put into lunch bags and sent home with kids from school. And parents were freaked out about that. And now there's probably nothing terribly wrong about the health message that's in there. But, you know, they're not supposed to be meddling in public schools. They say this time, well, it was just one volunteer, but that's what they always say. It's always somebody else. They do, however, try whenever possible to sneak into public schools, like with their drug-free marshals program. And I'm happy to say that apparently that's been banned here in Clearwater. But even more, last October, when everyone got delivered this copy of Freedom magazine about the downtown development, and specifically about the Tampa Bay Times story, where they revealed that Scientology had secretly bought up all the remaining property downtown, people called the police. They were so outraged that this magazine was delivered to them. It was kind of creepy how they managed to get through gates and locked buildings to individually deliver one of these to every single person in the city. Instead of just answering some of Tracy McManus's questions about the purchases, Scientology prepared this entire magazine as a response. And this magazine says the real problem, the real reason our downtown is dead is the Tampa Bay Times and that pesky Tracy McManus. Well, I don't believe that. One Scientologist at the last city council meeting called the Tampa Bay Times a failed newspaper. Well, This newspaper has won Pulitzer Prize awards, including for their coverage on Scientology. It looks like the city's reaction to Scientology has evolved over the years. They fought and investigated Scientology for 20 years. Then they tried to, because no one was helping them get any help, they tried to just keep it calm and keep them off the front page of the paper. And more recently, we've decided that we need to partner with Scientology. And that came after the Urban Land Institute told us that all the plans that we paid for throughout the years to develop downtown, those are all good. Just do that. But you've got to partner with Scientology. And we did, we tried, and they stabbed us in the back immediately. What we wanted to do was have the aquarium move downtown, which would have been the biggest possible boost to the downtown. But Scientology fought that every step of the way, and it was derailed. And when the aquarium decided to sell the property, they sold it to the city for Imagine Clearwater instead of selling it to Scientology. David Miscavige, the leader of Scientology, was so furious that he cut off all communications with the city. And we found out in the next couple of years that Scientology and Scientologists started to buy up all the property downtown secretly, in cash primarily. $99 million of the $113 million spent was all spent in cash and all through LLCs, all in secret. And they paid between an average of 2 to 4 times the assessed value. Half the sales, as we were talking about earlier, like Mr. Casato's and Mr. Imrani's 308 Chestnut property, were from one Scientologist owner to another. And they all were highly inflated prices. And there's nothing much we can do about that. There's no laws against buying property. But let's factor in Miscavige cutting off all communications and saying, as he did, that he would wait for the next city council. Then, what appears to have been a coordinated effort to purchase all the property downtown. We don't know that, but it certainly brings up the question, just like with the IRS suddenly being peppered with thousands of lawsuits in 1 week. Is Scientology somehow behind this scheme to buy up all the property? Again, it took several years before Miscavige started speaking with the city. And when he did, we didn't really get any answers from him as to what the plans are for all these properties. Even with the 2 properties that he owns. All he made clear in the meetings with the city is that he still wants that same property that the aquarium sold to the city. Now, again, we as a city don't have the ability to deal with this situation other than hope for the best. Or do we? I'm not accusing anyone of anything here. I'm saying this should be explored. If you look at the definition of racketeering, that's when a person or an organization creates a problem for others with the purpose of solving that problem by some other type of extortion. For instance, David Miscavige wants that property. He didn't get it. He potentially coordinated with parishioners to buy up all the land downtown to potentially sabotage Imagine Clearwater to get his way. Do what he says, according to Freedom Magazine, and he and Tom Cruise will personally recruit a movie theater for downtown and bring in a nightclub, and he would bring in the anchor stores like a steakhouse, and he would, out of the goodness of his heart, redo all the facades downtown. So if you don't do what he says, then you got a nice little downtown here. Be a shame if something happened to it. Now, this is as we are preparing to spend $64 million plus on the Imagine Clearwater project. We can't do anything about potential racketeering, but the FBI can. And dozens of properties suddenly in a very small area like this being purchased is a red flag to the FBI. All that property being bought in cash is a red flag to the FBI. And that kind of thing is the FBI. That's what they're there for. And I think we should be responding to this by bringing the FBI in to investigate. Do I know this happened? No. But it sure makes more sense than the non-answers we're getting. So I hope that we reach out to the FBI and forward this information to them and ask for help. There's other things happening in the city that we shouldn't turn a blind eye to. There's widespread reports of Sea Org members who, for decades, have had their visas and passports held. There are a lot of folks coming over from other countries on a religious work visa, and they find themselves trapped here. We've had people from Eastern Europe recently reach out to some folks I know and say that they were held against their will. We can't do anything about that, but there's federal agencies that can, and we should be trying to send this information out to get some assistance for people. If we take action that shows that we're not afraid of Scientology, I think that's going to help the people of Clearwater realize they don't need to be afraid of Scientology. And I would like to see personally some sessions where the public can comment and share their personal stories of perhaps intimidation, whether it's a business that's been driven away or people who don't feel safe downtown. And of course, anyone is welcome to come and say the opposite of that as well. But I think we should find some safe way for people to be able to come forward and talk about the things that normally don't get mentioned. If any of these charges are true, the IRS really needs to rethink their ruling on Scientology's tax-exempt status. And this is in an era when the media is no longer afraid of writing about Scientology. Where HBO educates millions with Going Clear, and Leah Remini and Mike Rinder could have a weekly series exposing some of the darker aspects of Scientology's nature, and South Park can say, "Sue me," and not get sued. There weren't enough of them in Clearwater to defeat me in the last election. Someone allegedly overheard a prominent Scientologist say, "We control the downtown development board, and soon we'll control the city council." The person who overheard that was too frightened to put her name to it. We'll see. David Miscavige wanted to wait until the next council was seated, and here we are. So I would respectfully ask that we have some public sessions so folks can talk about their fears, talk about why they don't want to come downtown, and what would bring them downtown. I also would like to, at some point, maybe have a day or two worth of testimony from people like Graham Barry, who is an attorney who's been helping people who have been dealing with elder abuse, the fraud that goes along with. There are there are Scientologists who are the salespeople in the group who are opening up credit cards for seniors without their permission or knowledge, and then charging courses on those cards, getting them deep in debt. And Graham Berry has very successfully sued and gotten the money back from Scientology in those cases. That's probably happening here. We should at least let people know that there's someone who's listening, and perhaps we can get you the right people that can help. All of this is happening in Clearwater. So anyway, I believe I've said my case here.
Any comments from council members? Well, Mr. Bunker, I mean, people are always welcome to come to Citizens to be heard every time we have a council meeting and speak to any item that they want to. I don't know if you're envisioning significantly longer periods of time. I don't know what a structure like that would look like. It would be different than anything we've ever done, obviously. I am more than happy to talk about Scientology. I have never shied away from the subject. Back when I was mayor before and throughout my entire campaign. I mean, I have always told people that, you know, we need to come downtown. It is your downtown. You should not be scared of Scientology. You will not catch Scientology if you are not a Scientology believer. You know, I've gone to a church for 41 years that has had, you know, controversy between the two organizations. But I encourage our citizens to come downtown and support a lot of the businesses, the people that have put blood, sweat, tears, and their own money, who are not Scientologists, into restaurants and other businesses and avail themselves. If there's one way to get more private investment down here, it is to prove to others that businesses can thrive. You know, and it was very encouraging to me to be down here Thursday and Friday and hear all the people who say, I go to downtown Dunedin, I go to downtown St. Pete, I don't want to have to drive that far, I want to drive to my downtown. And I said, well, you need to go and tell your friends and neighbors that they ought to join you next week. We have limited capacity right now as we deal with the COVID-19 crisis, but you know, I think there is some positive momentum going on right now. I hope that that will continue. And I'm always happy to discuss pretty much anything. But Councilmember Hamilton, and then I'll come back to you, Mr. Bunker.
I guess my question would be for the city attorney, because I mean, really nothing that Mr. Bunker just said, the different things he said, those are all things that have been expressed by individuals and other people before this. There was no revelation to what he brought out today as far as history-wise and things of that nature. My question is, if given that this is not new information, you know, if a federal agency wanted to, you know, has had access to this information, if a federal agency wanted to look into it, I think they would have already done that, or they would be doing it. And if they were doing it, we probably wouldn't know about it because they don't operate in the sunshine like we have to. But Ms. Akin, what is your take on, I mean, and I agree with the mayor, you know, we have citizens to be heard before every single meeting. People can come and tell their story if they would like to. I'm not sure that, I don't know yes or no, negative or positive, if we had a quote unquote special meeting strictly about people coming to tell us their, you know, Scientology story, pro or positive or negative, however they perceive it. Is that going to empower more people to come speak than, would it empower more people come to speak? I don't know. So I guess asking the city attorney, what is your take on what Mr. Bunker said?
Well, I guess my question about having public hearings, if you will, is what is your objective? As Mr. Bunker mentioned, the city had an ongoing investigation for probably close to 20 years and closed that investigation probably 15, 20 years ago. So I'm not real sure what the point of a public hearing is. If our objective is the downtown and to encourage people to come downtown and to encourage development of downtown, I'm not sure that that is the way to do that. So I'm not really sure what such hearings would have as their objective in terms of the city's goals and the downtown's goals and the CRA's goals and directions would be. As far as the FBI investigation or potential investigation, certainly the city would cooperate in the event those were initiated, but I'm not really sure what else we would do at this point.
Councilmember Bunker and then the vice mayor.
Okay. Yeah, I also always try to push people to come downtown and tell them it's safe, that I come down here and nothing's going to happen to them. But there's that fear still. Aaron Smith-Levitt and I have been doing a series of videos where we would go to a downtown restaurant and do a review and chat down here. And the whole point was to say, it's okay to come downtown. There's great restaurants here, and it's yours. What I guess I was trying to say in my muddled question, or my muddled statement rather, was that the fear that people have can be alleviated when you stand up and say, all right, I'm not going to be afraid of you. That's why I ran, to show that it's not the kiss of death to mention Scientology. And we should try to do something about the things that we tend to turn a blind eye to. And I think if we were to, I don't know why we couldn't reach out to the FBI and say, look at what is happening here. Look at these red flags. Can you check into this? That seems to me showing the city is taking some actions that hopefully would lead to some answers, which we're not getting from Scientology. And again, I do think, if there is wrongdoing that's uncovered on a scale like the RICO Act, then definitely the IRS should reconsider the tax exempt status, and stripping Scientology of that would bring money back into the city and show that the city is willing to not just sit back and continue to be stabbed in the back with every action they take. So that's my point. As far as the feedback in an open meeting, I think I was actually just asking, hey, can we put this on a regular agenda for a Thursday night and have people come and share some feedback. The other thing I had been considering asking for along the way, back in 1982, the city did a week's worth of hearings about Scientology, which were incredibly informative. But most of the stuff that you would hear in those hearings, everyone knows nowadays. You can turn on Leah Remini's Scientology in the aftermath and hear the personal stories of people. But I think it might be useful to have experts come and talk about some situations that are legally troublesome and things that we should be aware of, and sources for folks to get some help. So a day or two of hearings like that, I think, might be very useful at some point.
Councilmember Albritton.
You know, they don't call it the elephant in the room for no reason. It's just a hard subject to grapple. I wasn't here, although I lived in Clearwater all my life. I was away in college the year they came in. My parents were here and told me how all that happened, and kind of followed it when I got back out of college. You know, I always think that, I know this for a fact, people are scared of what they don't know. And I understand the whole thing of Scientology is not very clear, and people, and all the horror stories, as you've just repeated, that we've heard for years, but you did a nice, concise kind of history of that, people are aware of. And every time something comes up in the Times, as you said, they blame the paper for nobody coming down in Clearwater. So I think, and I'm going to tell you two things here. Whenever we talk about this, my big thing is communication with the church. And I understand that whoever you talk to on a level below Miscavige is hard, because it doesn't, I mean, if you want to get something done, you got to go to him. He did, after the sale of the land, said nobody talked to anybody. And yeah, I came into council 2 years ago. Nobody talked to me from the church for 2 years. So as the paper said, the secret meeting with the city. Well, it was a meeting that was put together, and the city manager and the city attorney went over to finally meet with Miscavige to say, hey, can we keep this narrative going? Because we want to understand what's going on. We, instead of guessing, you can go out and put your finger up and people tell you a million different guesses why they're doing this, but nobody really knows for sure.
So what answers have you got? Oh, I'm sorry.
So let me finish.
Yeah.
So when I say communication with the church, I think is very important. I get people that know me from my childhood that turn on me. I mean, they think that I'm a Scientologist now. And I'm like, no, I just want to know what's going on. I got to treat everyone equal in this society. When I came into this office, I'm sitting in this chair, everybody has to be treated equal. If they're breaking the law, that's different. If I know that there's a specific reason they're breaking the law, we can have the FBI, we can have a police chief. But I've got to be even-handed on everybody here. Everybody is recognized, whether you consider Scientology a religion or not. I mean, they are here. So I think what you're telling me is let's have hearings. You're going to get everybody that has, you're going to have repeating of your story from everybody that hates Scientology. It's going to do nothing for telling a positive story about downtown that we're really working hard to do. We've been working hard for the last 2 or 3 years to give a positive story for downtown, all the positive things that happen, not lying, not making up a story, but we've actually got people down here. And I'm just as passionate, Mark, about this as you are. Okay. The downtown, our downtown is my city. I was born and raised here. And I am sitting in this seat because I want to see this vibrant again. I think it can be done.
Yeah.
But we can't do it with telling negative stories about it. And then people go off saying, well, I'm never going to go down there because, you know, the Scientologists are down there. I think we need to really work hard on giving the positive stories out there, giving the support of the people, the businesses are down here, and to not say, hey, cut Clearwater downtown off because it's never going to amount to anything. Just give it to the church and then let's make a downtown in North Clearwater somewhere. That ain't going to work with me. So it's a very hard thing for me to grapple with this and to be, positive to people that say, why aren't you doing anything about it? Well, what do you suggest I do? Give me a positive thing that I can do to really help this situation. And I was hoping to hear something from you today in that aspect, other than holding a hearing downtown and hearing people's horror stories. That, that's all we're going to hear. We're not going to hear any positive stories. Nobody's going to come forward with that. But seemed like every time that we got a little bit ahead, and I'm not blaming the Times, I'm just saying that's just the way it is. The Times would come out with an expose and then we'd be back 2 steps, one step forward, 2 steps back. Our downtown just keeps doing this. And I would love to have a constructive idea on how to move forward on this. So if anybody that's got a constructive idea that, besides, hey, picking up phone and calling the FBI, I'm sure they know more than I do about it. So anyway, that's my comment. I just want to get it off my chest and let you know how I feel about it.
Councilmember Bunker.
Yeah, I actually think it is a positive suggestion to say that there's potential real crime going on from this organization. I'm not saying it's happening, but it seems to fit a pattern, just as they did with the IRS, where the church coordinates thousands of individual lawsuits to bring the IRS to its knees. It certainly seems like David Miscavige cut off all communication. He bought the first properties in April of 2017, I think. And then a month or 2 after that, all the other individual Scientologists started buying up all the remaining property and sat on them until, I don't know if Mr. Imrani and Mr. Cassano's property was the first one to be developed, but we haven't had any answers. And you sat down and you talked with Miscavige. What did he tell you? And do you think that Scientology has a negative impact on downtown?
Councilmember Beckman, you haven't said anything. I'm not letting you off.
Yeah, I know. I mean, my wheels are just like, oh my gosh. I love, Mr. Councilmember Albritton's statement about, people fear what they don't know and what they don't understand. And I think that's, part of, I don't know enough about the Church of Scientology, and I didn't grow up here, and I don't have a visceral reaction the way a lot of residents do who I spoke to. The feedback I got from residents was not so much about fear. They didn't use the word "I'm afraid to come downtown." They just, they didn't like the vibe down there. They didn't like the atmosphere. They didn't like it just wasn't welcoming. And I think that's part of, the storefronts that are, the empty storefronts, the storefronts that have a uniform look on Fort Harrison. And, there's just a certain look that the Scientology buildings have about them. That's kind of this homogeneous look that isn't traditional with a downtown, that, in my opinion, and probably a lot of residents, is that it's not quite as inviting because, it sort of looks like a movie set sometimes. But what I try to do is, when I think about Scientology or speak about it, I try to put another religious denomination in my head and say, well, we need to get this Baptist church. We need to get we've got 3 Baptist churches down here. We need to get these Baptists in here and talk to us about their behavior and what they've purchased. And I'm all about the legality of it. And if they've legally acquired those properties, whether they sit on them or not, or whether they paid cash or paid 4 times as much, I totally agree it's red flag. I totally agree it's not the norm, and it makes you wonder. But you don't have the legal right to demand an answer for it. If it's like that property on Chestnut, if they want to build it for office suites, and who knows what our future is going to hold as far as renting office space, it's their business. But I would say if there are stories or rumblings about illegalities going on behind closed doors, that needs to follow the path as it would in the Catholic Church or the Baptist Church or the YMCA or anything else. If there are, if people suspect there's misbehavior going on, I think we have proper legal channels, and I don't think airing of grievances in a city council venue is productive. Not just narratives. I don't think we should be there with narratives. I think you should need to come forward with evidence. And if you have documented evidence, that needs to go to an attorney or a police department or whatever those venues are. It's not a city council venue for that. I don't think so. And I just think it antagonizes people. And I don't think it's real productive that way. Do I think we should engage in discussions with Mr. Miscavige? I sort of think we do. I mean, I've never spoken to the man. I've only seen photos of him, but I think we should probably ask to sit down and have a conversation, because not talking hasn't worked. We're not making progress. And so why keep doing the same thing and expecting different results? And so what can it hurt? And people know I'm very transparent and open and candid. And so if I were to meet with him or whatever, I would report back fully on what that conversation entailed and what developed. Just like I do when people ask me, somebody said you had a conversation with leaders of Ruth Eckerd Hall. What did you guys talk about? I'm like, this is what we talked about. Here's some of the documents they shared. I share that. So yes, I want to work to improve it. Yes, I think that there's a atmosphere downtown that they contribute to that's not the norm of a normal, vibrant downtown. But that's their choice. They own those buildings. They own that property. They're up to code. That's it. That's as far as we can go. But I think we just say, and I think Mr. Mayor Hibbard has said this, it's like, this is my downtown. I'm not going to be bullied by anyone. And we're going to be down here and enjoy this beautiful, waterfront and this, vibrant Cleveland Street now and live music and embrace the store, the merchants that are down there now. And, I think that's the tactic to take, is to just say, if you've got problem with some, landowners down here, don't let them take the whole thing away from you. It's yours. It's ours. We need to go down there and enjoy it. And I think that the more we're down there, the more you see that it's okay. Nobody's coming and attacking me. There's nothing to be afraid of here. We all just intermingle and celebrate that diversity and move on. There are bigger problems.
Councilmember Bunker.
That do it for you?
Sure.
I'd be happy to talk to David Miscavige. If anyone wants to arrange a meeting for me, I'd be thrilled to sit down and talk with him. I really doubt that he's going to come up with answers for anyone. He's had an opportunity. It looks like a real pattern here, and I could be wrong about this, but he didn't get what he wanted. He put an operation in place, perhaps, to get leverage, which is a big thing in Scientology. Even in Battlefield Earth, Turl needed leverage. So he came back and said, okay, now I still want that property. Scientology's goals are different from the city's. Just a few years ago, Scientology continued to say, we want this to be the first Scientology city. Now, the good news is they're not going to succeed at that. They wanted Glendale, California to be the first Scientology city. They wanted Rhodesia to be the first Scientology country. Scientology continues to shrink. They used to say they have 10,000 or 10 million members. Well, they just recently, came out in the open and said, "Oh yeah, we only have a few tens of thousands of members." So my suggestion is that people should come downtown, and they shouldn't be afraid. But how many people actually think that Scientology is one of the reasons why people aren't coming downtown, and it has been since '75? Anyone?
I think it is. I think it's
No, I
part.
know it's one of the reasons. I sent out
Yeah.
22,000 questionnaires and got about 3,000 of them back.
Okay.
Some of them with volumes and literally. And I'm not talking about a handful. I'm talking about hundreds that came back with multiple pages of things.
Right.
But part of that is we have to get over some of the perception. And there is a large group of people within Clearwater that go back to the 70s and 60s who've lived here forever. They will never come downtown. They told me that in no uncertain terms. But there are a large group of people that want to still come downtown if there is something to come to.
Mm-hmm.
We have not always had something to come to. We have looked for a silver bullet in downtown Clearwater for as long as I've been involved, and Mr. Hamilton's been involved the same amount of time. Mr. Albritton's lived here a long time. That's kind of what got me into elected office in the first place. And we had failed referendums in 2000 and 2004. And we finally had a successful referendum in 2006, which got the marina. And we bought the Capitol Theater in the middle of 2008-09, which was kind of a silly time to be buying things, but it was an opportunity. And now it's a gem in downtown. And nobody worked harder on the aquarium referendum in 2012. After I had left office, I went and did 70 different neighborhood meetings trying to get that. I think it was one of the greatest mistakes that's been made in the last 20 years not to follow through, because we'll see 1 million people at that aquarium once it opens, and it will be a gem. And those 1 million people could have been in downtown Clearwater. But I can't worry about what hasn't worked. I got to figure out what's going to work. Mr. Bunker.
And I'm worried that Imagine Clearwater is going to be another one of those silver bullets that may potentially fail for the same reason the others have.
The Capitol Theater is not a failure, sir. Capitol Theater is the #2 theater in the nation for its size.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything
That's a
negative
fact
about it. Yeah.
And let me just chime in here. I think we were instrumental in getting the vote docs. I was on the DDB at a time, and we obligated the city. We get obligated to give the city $50,000 to make that thing happen. And everybody at that time were going, "Oh, that's the worst idea. Nobody's ever going to be there," and it turned out to be a gem. So I have faith that things we do, well thought plans, will actually pay off in the long run. Imagine Clearwater is a beautiful plan. Clearwater only has this bluff that goes on the water. I mean, besides if you wanted to go over to the bay side, we don't have a lot of water exposure. This is it. And by, doing what we are planning to do there, that had all the public input. They're the ones that came up with the 3 different areas. And again, I'm staunchly support exactly what the referendum said, with the music venue and the respite area and a playground for kids. Families will come down there from all over Clearwater and enjoy our waterfront, and it's not going to fail. I can tell you, for being here all my life, and let's don't mess it up and think it's not going to work. It's a beautiful place with a bluff and our downtown will, you know, you go downtown now and got a great view of the water. And what Michael's doing, our assistant city manager, with lighting the bridge up, just that's going to bring people down to come look at it. So I really look forward to discussing this special meeting next month. I think we got a lot of things we can talk about there, and I look forward to that. So,
Councilmember Hamilton, you're muted.
In Clearwater discussion, but you know, as far as, you know, the Scientology, you know, we've got to, you know, until a federal agency wants to come in here and change their status, we don't have the time or the resources to even worry about it. We've got to move forward with what we can do. And I agree with David wholeheartedly, and, you know, and Mayor, I agree with you. You know, Imagine Clearwater is a great plan. And if you want Imagine Clearwater to fail, let it be 20 acres of passive nothing. Then it will fail. But you know, the other part that you have to realize, and Frank, you and I have done this long enough to know, you know, sometimes when you start getting down to the nuts and bolts of something like Imagine Clearwater, the people that you're hearing from the loudest and the most often are the ones who weren't on the winning side of the referendum. And the referendums passed very, very strongly. These weren't 51-49 referendums. These were 70-30 and 65-35. These were strong. We want Imagine Clearwater. We want this to happen. We want this plan. And as we move forward, we get closer and closer to dialing in on the nuts and bolts of it. The people we're hearing from the most, the people who voted in favor of it and wanted to go forward, they don't feel the need to be out there and be vocal. They trust us to do what they said. This is what we're voting for. This is what we want you to do. It's the people who were on the losing end or the short end of the vote that are now saying, oh, you got to do this, and you can't do that, and you can't do that. You and I have been doing it long enough to understand that. And, you know, this is something we have got to do. This is something has been way too long in coming. Yes, the pandemic is going to put a little bit of a break on the timing of it, but the final product should not change from what we have approved and what we're moving forward with, because that's what our public bluff downtown needs to be. So with that, I'll get off my soapbox so we can all go have lunch.
Anything else for anyone to add? Okay, well, I look forward to the Imagine Clearwater discussion. It is great to tell everybody that we had 767 applications for our grant program. And Denise and her crew will start looking at that. And I look forward to seeing all of you on Thursday. Until then, we're adjourned.